And in today's conversation, we're going to be talking about removing fear and eliminating many of your challenges. So, to recap, in our past conversation, we talked about some of the most common obstacles you face, and we also shared some tools to overcome or to prevent them. And today, we're really going to be talking about the influence of fear in your life, and most of your obstacles, which I think we can all agree, are caused by fear. And part of it is simply just being honest with yourself, and you'll realize that probably many of your obstacles are caused by fears and inability to deal with them in an appropriate ways. So today, we're going to address some of those areas that could be causing fear that might be holding you back. And we'll also talk about some practical things that you can do to move forward. Of course, some of these may not be some earth shattering new thing that you're like, oh my gosh, I've never heard that before. But sometimes just the gentle reminder of, hey, remember to get yourself through. So let's talk about some examples of fear. There's relationship issues, there's money issues, procrastination can be caused by fear of failure or the perceived discomfort of performing an unpleasant task, stuck in a job you dislike. What are some other examples where fear comes into play that can actually stop you from moving forward? And if you guys are watching here today live, feel free to go ahead and put your comments in the chat box as well. But Danielle, how about you?
Sometimes I think the fear of what others are going to think of you or how they perceive you or what you're doing.
Mm. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sometimes I think if you have this great idea and you want to implement it somehow, whether it's in your business, if it's in your family life, or whatever it is, there's sometimes the biggest critics closest to you are sometimes your family. And it's like, well, what are they going to think of me if I start doing this? Or um, just just the fear of like, what are others going to think if I try to do this and I don't succeed at it?
All right. And that falls right underneath the banner of the relationship issues, right? Um, the fear of not being accepted. When I think about, we talked about the money issues, so to speak, that's another fear. And folks, again, the goal of this is really address what's going on. I mean, that's part of the way to go ahead and break through the next issue. For example, money issues. Uh, now this is going to actually blow your mind. When I was doing some research, many people deal with fear and anxiety by shopping. I don't know if that surprises any of you guys who are watching it all, which in turn creates debt. And but some simply fear the discomfort and are unable to let go of that, like the expensive car or morning coffee. Uh, Dennis, I think you were there for a second. We just lost you. Looks like you're trying to reconnect there. We'll come back here. How about this fear? And let's just dive into this. And for those of you guys who are watching, feel free to go ahead and put your comments here. Agree or disagree, Danielle? Procrastination can be caused by fear of failure or the perceived discomfort of performing an unpleasant task.
I agree with that. I think sometimes we can um, let the fear of not being great at something stop us from even trying to attempt it because we don't like that feeling of not being good at something.
Okay. And things, if you don't do, how do you know? You know, I think, for people who are in sales watching, one of the things we have is this thing called the phone distraction. Now, the phone is our friend, but it also can become an enemy in terms of being productive. I don't know about you, Danielle, but I get caught up in knowing that there's an activity that I must do, and I have a diversion tactic called looking at social media. Oh no, I just gotta do it, and then this story starts building in our heads of what can happen. So let's talk about now, like how to handle fears that are holding you back. So this, some of you guys know this, that I also help coach volleyball. And if you're brand new to volleyball, a typical team has at least 10 players. Well, we have 11 players on our team. It was the Badger Region Championships, and we were down to 6. Now, if you know the positions in volleyball, there's what they call a setter who sets the ball. There's your back row, then you got your front row. Well, a lot of times in the front row, people, except unless you're in what they call an outside hitter on the outsides of the net, the middles do not pass much. Like they're there for a reason to block and hit. Well, we played our first games of the tournament with three middles out of six. So imagine three people who play the position of middle are not used to passing, and they're going to be called on to passing. And I remember one of them saying, "Pull me aside before the it all started," saying, um, "I can't pass. Oh, I can't pass." Like literally, like you could tell the young man was overwhelmed with this fear. Well, he had no choice. He was going to have to pass. And truth be told, after day one tournament, guess what he said? I like back row. Back row's pretty good. you know? So in terms of one way to handle it is realizing that fear is uncomfortable, but it isn't a good reason to avoid doing something. What's your guys' thoughts on that there's no reason to let fear guide every decision you make? Looks like Dennis is trying to get back on. I'll ask that to Danielle.
I think that it's important to act through it and not let it stop you. I think sometimes just the moving forward and acting eliminates that, and it starts to give you the sense of like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, and builds that like little notch in your confidence to keep going forward on something else that may um, cause you to question whether or not you should try that.
That's a good point. It builds a notch of confidence saying, you know what, I did it once, I can probably do that again. Dennis, looks like you were able to get back to the audio here. But I said the comment of what's your thoughts of not, that there's no reason to let fear guide every decision you make. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, I think he might be frozen. Yeah, we're having a little technical difficulty. That's all right. So here's a strategy to use, and that's this. Think about the fearful activity and simply breathe. Simply breathe. So, Danielle, one of the things they talk about, when you're going through anxiety and feeling these overwhelmed things, is that you have a lot of short breaths. And short breaths, what it does, it causes a negative reaction in your body, which quickly becomes an anxiety attack. So, have you ever had a situation, if you can recall a story, where you were feeling that complete overwhelm, you thought the breath was like, and then you said, okay, you use this strategy, it's like, I gotta just calm down and breathe.
I actually do this a lot when I was marathon training, is that heart rate becomes a big issue while you're running. And one of the things that I would constantly repeat to myself is control your breath, control your heart rate. And I would focus on just breathing and taking that next breath, slowing it down, releasing it slowly to calm my heart rate. Because when you're distance running, um, one of the things that you're going to run into if you don't control that is not being able to continue on and to be having to stop and like figure out how to like get yourself out of this almost anxiety attack. And so that's something actually I practice a lot of, is realizing that if I'm controlling my breath, I'm controlling my heart rate, and it alleviates that fear of what's next.
Right. And it's so important, like to know, be aware of yourself when it happens. Another strategy that I've learned is learn more about your fear. So, what do you both think about actually logging down, journaling your reactions, and becoming more consciously aware of when you're feeling that fear? Because fear is there for a reason too. What are your
Can
thoughts
you
on
hear
that?
me now?
Oh, we can hear you there, Dennis.
Hey, okay. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So, fear is one of those words that I'm sure you're exploring, but it's one that we don't like to admit. As you said, it has beneficial aspects. It keeps us alive.
Hmm.
So whether it's fear of emerging competition or fear of a potentially disruptive meeting, or fear of going out in public because of the pandemic, these things also protect us.
Hmm.
That idea of fear.
Hmm.
But when it's coupled with a number of other categories or a number of other um, traits like uncertainty and doubt, that is the company destroyer, and that is what we should be sensitive to as leaders, is the fact that we are being looked to provide leadership, and unfortunately, fearful leaders that show that fear are not often followed.
So true. And that's the they go leading by fear. Some people like there's the Machiavellian. They say approach like, you know what? Put the fear of them, and then you're going to go ahead and be a better leader. But we all know that that's temporary leadership. It was not sustaining. You know,
Right? And while
part,
um, that may appear to be efficient on the surface, it is not, as you said, sustainable. And that's one of the things we want to have in our relationships and our business and our families and whatever else is sustainability.
yeah. And that leads me to one of the other strategies right there, Dennis, is that make a list of the ways that fear is holding you back. In my experience, some part of my life is that when I've encountered turmoil, it's likely because I made some poor decisions in the past. And think about how did fear affect my decision making abilities at that time. What you guys'
Yep.
thoughts about that? Making a list of ways that fear is holding you back.
I'm not a list maker. I'll yield to Danielle on that.
Okay.
I think, I don't know whether it's a mental list, then you can clog your brain with it if you try to keep it in your head. But really just the awareness of how you can use past experiences as a guiding force to the things that you're looking to accomplish in the future and the present, and being resourceful. And so I don't think that it's a bad thing to understand why it's happening. And maybe it's a time to take a reflection on, like, are these repeated things happening over and over again? And now why is it's not always then another person's thing, it's like your thing, like what
Right.
are you missing, um and could work on to not allow these things to continue happening over and over again.
And that's one other strategy that's really good is actually remembering the times that you were fearful and still made a good choice. Because I think all of us can raise our hand, those of you who are watching here as well, that, we've all had those times where we felt fear, but we managed to take the appropriate course of action anyways. And reminding yourself of those times and remember how strong you can be, that's one of the ways you can remove fear and eliminate many of your challenges. Here's my next strategy, and I'd really be interested to hear your guys' take on this because this is something that um, I've read, I've been mentored on, and that's the practice of dealing with discomfort. Taking a situation that you'll find mildly uncomfortable and force yourself to deal with small doses of the discomfort and increase the level exposure over time. Thoughts on that? And the question is, practice dealing with discomfort.
Oh, absolutely. That is so true. Take little steps, grow your immune system, so to speak, strengthen your resilience against the things that you do fear, and you will be stronger. There's no doubt about it.
Hmm. I was listening to this talk. This guy is known as like he made like $50 billion, and if you ever heard Joe Rogan, Joe Rogan even said, I don't even know if I can have him on my podcast. And if you've already been exposed to Joe Rogan's podcast, for him to say that, you're like, wow. His name is Dan Pena, Pena, and he's like 70 some years old. And I mean, he brings it hardcore. And he goes, every day do something that scares you, that's in alignment with your values. I don't want to say the beliefs, but the values. He goes, now my comfort zone's like this, like nothing fears me. He goes, I killed a knife with a bear and I'm 70 years old. Not recommending anyone to do that, just to let you guys know. But what can you do to practice dealing with discomfort? You know,
Rehearse, don't worry.
Tell us more about that there, Dennis.
So if interviewing people or talking to people is a problem, talk to more people,
Mm,
right? If performance reviews are an issue, put an eye on it and engage in the process, especially if you're in a leadership role where you have to do performance reviews. You know, people just avoid uncomfortable situations.
mhm.
So the way to overcome that, like when I was a little kid and I was a swimmer, the way they got to put you up on the high diving board, which is a 12-meter high board, was to throw you in the deep end of the water and see if you could tread water for 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Got you
Y-
over.
You know, that makes me think, Dennis, though, is what you just said. How often are we letting the thought of doing something be a bigger, I mean, let me back up. How often do we actually make the fear bigger than it actually is?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, in the great Frank Herbert story, Doom, fear is the mind killer, and all battles are lost or won first in the mind.
Oh, yeah.
So
So true.
fear prevents that, and fear will never allow you to function victoriously. And that's what we're really talking about here. You know,
And that goes back to the rare mindset. A rare leader, which all you are, is a leader who embraces being resourceful, being adaptable, being resilient, and the willingness to engage with others. I think one of the other strategies when you are facing a fear is to talk it out with someone else.
yeah.
Um, Another strategy, which we have, and you guys will find this in a document later, realize, and you guys both have touched on this, is that realize that discomfort and fear are frequently good things. I was told this many years ago, if you're not doing anything that makes you uncomfortable, your life is likely to stay the same.
I think that's true.
Hmm. Is
Some
it?
influences, and if you're challenged in embracing them, or you avoid them, you're going to avoid grand opportunities for the greatest changes in your life.
Hmm.
And it's those greatest changes that offer the greatest rewards.
So true. Daniil, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I look at is if something good can come out of what I'm afraid of doing, then it's probably something that I need to lean into and challenge and push through the fear to go after it. Because I think a lot of the times we look at like, oh, I'm afraid to do this because I don't want to fail. But if it's going to make me a better person on the
Totally.
other side of it, that's when you really need to just challenge it and push through and not let it hold you back.
That's great. It's like asking yourself the question, instead of thinking about all the things that could go wrong, ask yourself, well, what if I did this? What could be the benefits of it? What could be the impact of it? I remember when I was in my 20s, I was into somewhat of the wanting to be accepted at times too. And it's still something I have to work through. Um, but one of my mentors said this to me: what do you fear more? And this was a different perspective on it: letting your family down by not doing it, or that no you might encounter? It's a hard question to ask, right? But do you fear that no more than the fear of letting your family down? I'm like, well, no, I don't want to let my family down. Okay, then I guess that's your answer to your question. Go out there and get that no. I think that's a lot of times rare leaders in the leadership period is, like you said, Danielle, is asking like, what's the better of it? It could be those uncomfortable conversations that you're holding on to. It could be, just doing something like Eleanor Roosevelt says, like do something that actually makes you uncomfortable every day. And some people go, that might be exhausting. Well, some days it might be, but it's also thrilling though to know that you broke through to that next level. Um, so here's some items, some ideas to stimulate some of your guys' thinking. So when you feel like quitting an unenjoyable task, persist for another 15 minutes, aka if you have to work out, just go for it. Um, have challenging conversations instead of avoiding them. So for those of you guys who are watching, is there a conversation that you need to have that you haven't had and it's been weighing on you? I don't know about you guys, but Danielle and Dennis, has there ever been a time when you had one of those challenging conversations you know you needed to have but didn't have, and it was just eating at you, and all of a sudden you had it, you felt a lot better?
Yeah, I think oftentimes that the fear of what you're going to hurt the other person's feelings if you just talk to them, or that it's going to blow up into a different situation than it is. And the stories that we tell ourselves often are way worse than what the actual outcome of just doing it's going to be.
Hmm. Yeah. Dennis, what are your thoughts? Oh, you're on mute there, my friend. You're on mute there, Dennis. I'll let him.
There we go. So yeah, I try not to be eaten up by things if I can avoid it. I tend to be a conflict resolution person, so I can't remember the last time that I had procrastinated in having that necessary conversation. What thrills me is, as a leader, is when others have struggled with that and they have come and said, I wanted to talk to you about this for a while. To me, that shows a real breakthrough in the relationship,
Hmm.
because to acknowledge you have a fear and to be controlled or manipulated by that fear, and then to admit it, is to overcome it.
Hmm.
That's affirmation, positive affirmation of change. That person's willing to accept dealing with their vulnerabilities, that is admitting that they've had fear and that they procrastinated. To me, that's the thrill. I very rarely ever, in fact, I can honestly say I don't know a single, at least in maybe the last year or two, that I've ever put on having what could be a very uncomfortable, maybe.
Well, and I think too,
I don't
Dennis.
want it to be that. Uh,
We just broke up there. Uh, to to Dennis's point there, I'm sure, Dennis, you have worked that muscle over years to get to that point, right?
oh, yeah, absolutely. It takes thick skin. And I put people in two different categories: conflict embracers, conflict avoiders. And fear is the basis of a lot of conflict. Like you said, it stemmed from maybe making bad decisions in your life, bad choices. Yeah, that's true. But the person who said, for example, that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's an interesting saying. I don't know who the philosopher was, but mom would say it pretty regularly. But what if it does kill me? What if my fear is warranted? Right?
Right.
And there are practical situations where people who are conflict avoiders are really overcome by that potential of an aggravating circumstance that could permanently injure or damage them. And I know many people have experienced it this year with the pandemic.
Right.
I don't want it because I'm afraid of getting sick and dying.
Well, and part of that goes back to looking at the cost reward of things too. And I mean, there's true, like, as actually, like, the word that I was thinking in my head is pick your battles. Pick your battles. Is it a battle worth fighting? Like, is it worth to get into it? And we talked about different strategies here. Well, one was name the fear, and I appreciate what you said there, Dennis. Sometimes we run so much away from fear, and we don't own, like, what I am, like, one of the things they say in public speaking, or you're being with a new prospect for sales, is like, listen, I'm a little bit nervous speaking to you today. And this way, like you said and Danielle said, is like you're no longer giving that fear power over you. There's a great book that talks about that called The Magic of Thinking Big. It's an old time classic, but it talks about fear stands for false evidence is appearing real. But to summarize the things that we talked about is that there's different things. If you're honest with yourself, the obstacles that you might be coming across, they're caused by your fears and your inability to deal with them in an appropriate way. And we talked about some of those strategies that we've personally used to get through them. Number one, realize that fear that it's uncomfortable, but it isn't a good reason to avoid doing it. So think about the fearful activity and make sure you get your breathing down. Short breaths, anxiety. Take a big breath sometimes and relax. That's not. The next one is make a list of ways that the fear is holding you back. If some part of your life is in complete turmoil, it's likely that you made some poor decisions in the past. Make that list of what's holding me back to move forward. Go back and look at the times that you were fearful and still made a good choice. Practice dealing with discomfort. Do something that's going to make you a little bit uncomfortable today. That's in alignment with your values. I always want to say that. That's in alignment with your values. Dennis talked about the rehearsing and practicing, and realizing that discomfort and fear are frequently good things. If you're not doing anything that makes you uncomfortable, you're probably not growing. And then we talked about some things you can do today. Have that challenging conversation. Refuse to engage in avoidance, distraction techniques, social media, cell phone, TV, internet. Go out there and attack it. We're going to be talking more about how to go ahead and overcome obstacles and get yourself to the next level here to build that resilience and become the best. But as we go ahead and close out the next minute here, give us a quick 15, 20-second blurb real quick from each of you guys here today. Dennis first and then Danielle.
Embrace the fear. Avoid the things that don't make us feel comfortable. A leader is not afraid of fear.
Awesome. Danielle?
Just really look at what it is that's causing you the fear and just address it. Pick your battles. Is it something that is worth overcoming, or is it something that's just worth walking away from and learning from that and growing yourself from that?
Awesome. And then for myself, I'll just finish this up today with the thought of this is that, we mentioned it moments ago, fear a lot of times stands for false evidence is appearing real. There's a lot of great nuggets shared by Danielle and Dennis here, but, think about what's possible versus what could go wrong. And it's nothing wrong with thinking about what's going wrong because you want to be, prepared for it. But imagine as a rail leader what it really does for you by embracing this. And like Dennis said, the more you do it, the more that people that you lead, family, friends, will be inspired to push through the fear as well. So until next week, onward and upwards, Dennis Hill, Danielle Jalen, Tony Jalen. Until next week, rise up, rail leaders.